So we're mining for decades in many communities and districts across the country. What we haven't done is to really measure, are we seeing a link between the mining that we're sort of embarking on in these communities and the development in these areas? And that is what CDD set out to do with the Mining District Development Scorecard. And they developed a league table for us. So we can do that introspection. Stand in front of the mirror and ask ourselves, all the devastation that mining can cause, all the extraction that we do in these communities, is it having an impact, positive impact on the lives of these people in these communities, in these districts? Is it yielding development for them? And fascinating results indeed. And your guess may be as good as mine. If you traveled across the country to many of these mining districts, you can guess that what they found will not be something that we can be proud of. Let's get to the facts. So we know that as far as mining communities are concerned, if you're mining in a place, you would have to necessarily put in a lot of resources to try and make it commercially viable so you can extract and get the minerals from the ground. While you do that in a community, you have to pay royalties. Part of the royalties will go to the community and the community will use it for development. So that is how it works with what you see there in the background. So you mine, if you're a mining company in a community, you pay royalties that the government will now have to pay part of that royalties to the mining communities, and then they use that for development. But this is what CDD found when they went out to the district. There are 22 districts in question here that we have mining happening. And so these are the areas where they focused on. Right? These are where the royalties were paid and they received it. 22 districts. I say paid and received. You actually will find that there's a discrepancy between how much was allocated and how much was actually paid. So you see there, 54% of allocated royalties were not distributed by the Ministry of Finance. So yes, the law is very clear that you must allocate, but most importantly, you must distribute, because that is what you're entitled to. Why? Because the people there bear the brunt of the work that is happening. You definitely will see the impact of this on the environment. Of course, in many of the big mines, they spend quite a significant amount of resources reclaiming the land, etc. But there's a reason why that contract, that social license that the mining companies need to work is important, because you have to see that link. People see you mining huge firms, nice cars. Sometimes you have experts coming in, but they can't see any corresponding impact in your lives. And so there is a policy that says when you mine, you have to send a fair bit of that in royalties to the people. But here we are finding, as far as the CDD is concerned, that when we actually do the allocations, we don't send everything. 54% is significant indeed, and that's one of the key things they found there. This amounts to 135.6 million. So that's a lot. Can you imagine what this would do to a poor mining district in this country, right? So these are the arrears that the government owes some of these mining communities and districts across the country. And are we then surprised when we see the score there of the average score of 38.4% out of 100? This is poor indeed. CDD is charitable. They say it's a weak score. It is actually a very poor score, considering the decades that we've been mining in some of these mining districts. To have the score in terms of the development that the mining has actually brought to the community, it's quite horrible indeed. But it's beginning to paint a picture for us to appreciate the disconnect between the wealth that these communities are producing and adding to the national kitty, but they themselves do not benefit from it. For a 38.4 average score, it's quite horrible. And if you look at the big picture, you see the Brim North. You actually have just five mining districts above average, performing above average. That is a sad commentary indeed. Only 5 mining districts were performing above average. The rest of them are actually on the average mark or below that. And that clearly tells you that 38.4% is one that needs to improve. But how do you do that? Well, my guests join me for a conversation. We'll look at this. And why is this important? This is important at a time like this because we have the political parties all talking about what they'll do for mining communities and what they'll do with mining. Now, this is an area that the parties must definitely look at to improve, because every party then must tell us how they plan to improve this 38.4 score closer to the 100, right, over a 4-year period. And what policies do you plan to put in place to lift these communities from what they're currently experiencing to a score that is measurable? So by the time that the CDD goes back to measure this at the end of the 4 years, we should have seen that improvement. That is one of the key things that we'll be holding the parties to when we get them for our manifesto tracker conversation on these sort of issues. Now, what reasons did CDD find are why we're seeing this challenge in the communities in spite of the money that is happening there? Weak governance practices is one. The other thing that they found there is that limited citizen participation. So the royalties that are coming in, the citizens are not involved in the process, and so there isn't accountability, right? That is key. If you get a citizen involved, you get greater accountability. Where there's greater accountability, the managers of the funds tend to use it for the good of the entire society and not for the benefit of a few. Poor citizen evaluation is another key thing. So the involvement of the citizen is central to ensuring efficient use of the royalties that the communities get. Poor development outcomes in communities is another one. So even when they use the royalties, they're not seeing that corresponding improvement in the developmental outcomes in the communities. That's a key point to note. And so what are recommendations? A few things to say. Regular disbursement of the royalties. If you allocate, distribute, I guess is the way to put it. And then strengthen the transparency and oversight of the disbursement that we see in the community. Bring a bit more transparency there is a very important point, and get the citizens to participate a bit more. And then develop the Mineral Revenue Management Act, which we know is a very important part for civil society, advocating for an improved legislation around this. And then foster greater citizen engagement. That will bring you the transparency that you need. You can get citizen input. So you're not just, even if you want to help them develop, you're not imposing on them your own ideas of development, but it's a more bottom-up approach more than anything else. We're going to have a conversation about it. This is important as we approach the elections, it is, but also if you've traveled to any of the mining districts, you will see the squalor, the pain, the misery, the poverty that our folks live in spite of the fact that they are hosting billions and billions worth of gold, of bauxite, name the minerals that they are producing for the benefit of the entire country, but they are not benefiting from it. We're going to have a conversation about the Mining District Development Scorecard and look at that league table here on PM Express. And PMS is always brought to you by Syntex Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. Academic Times, Baraka Policy Institute, and MGO radio platforms back on tuning. It's something that you need to look forward to because it's exciting. You know, we're off tuning for a while. We're back, and you just download the app onto your phone and look for Joy FM on TuneIn because we're back. No matter your water needs, by the way, Syntex Tanks has it all for you. Syntex Tanks has first introduced a double-layer tank, and now you can have as many layers as you want. They are across the country, and they also come bespoke. You can get any size, any color you want, but they also have 7 years warranty. Call them on 0244 335 or shop online at syntexgh.com. Syntex Tanks, a strong, a tough. And I was talking to you about the Academic Times Ghana is an incoming graphic and online publication aiming to collaborate with university authorities and students to ensure that student research is published in summary form. This is to bridge the gap between the students' research and policymakers. Students spend a lot of resources doing their final year research, either for their own work, but also for the undergrad, PhD, etc. The question is, what is the significance of this research if the relevant stakeholders don't get to read it or hear about it? Now, students' research must make an impact by contributing to national and institutional development through collaboration with seasoned researchers, experienced lecturers, and other experts in the field of research. These students will be given the needed guidance to ensure that their research is conducted by scientific principles to which their studies relate. Additionally, the Academic Times Ghana will collaborate with organizations to ensure that students who cannot finance their research are sponsored to get the needed financial support to do their research properly. The Academic Times Ghana coming soon. The Academic Times Ghana developing institutional and national policies through research. And As you know, the 10th anniversary lectures is also on. It's the Baraka Policy Institute Reflections on the State of Education in Ghana, a diagnosis and the way forward. And there are key highlights that we are looking forward to, a panel discussion on the state of education in Ghana. And the topic is a strong one, reflections on education in Ghana, diagnosis and way forward. We have the panelists like the Honorable Dr. Yaose Duchum, who's the Education Minister. We have Dr. Clement Park, he's the Deputy Ranking Member on the Education Committee of Parliament. Dr. George Obuasi Afeti is a TVED expert. We'll all be on a panel, and you want to join it. The chairman is Na Hassan and Danny, and that is one that you really don't want to miss. My colleague Winkson will be moderating that too. By the way, I'm looking forward to this conversation tonight, and joining me for that tonight is CDD's own lady who has been doing a lot of work in this particular area, Vera Addo, is a programs officer at the Ghana Center for Democratic Development. Vera, thanks for joining us here in the studio. Elijah Danse Bona is the Municipal Chief Executive Officer at Obuasi Municipal Assembly, joins us. And Edwin Nilante Vanderpoy, you know him. I didn't know that he was called Edwin. Hello, Edwin. Nilante Vanderpoy joins us as the ranking member of the local government committee. Will join us pretty shortly. This is something that the committee has been looking into over the years, and so I'll get his thoughts on this here on PM Express. But Vera, let me start with you. Why did you focus exclusively on the mining districts?
Thank you for having me, Evans. So Ghana is known for our extractive industry. Ghana is known to be the gold coast, and for over 100 years that we've been mining. CDD is known for evidence-based, research-based advocacy, transparency, accountability. And so this time we thought that let's have a look at our minerals, our rich minerals districts. How are we doing in terms of our accountability, transparency? Because gold contributes a lot to our economy. If you look at our budget and even the district budgets, the significant revenue that the states actually get to support their budgets is from extractive industry, especially the gold mining industry. And so there's a need for us to have a look. It's more like an assessment or a reflection or evaluation of our mineral resources over the years, that how are we doing? So for us, we have a legal framework covering our mineral resources, but we've not really gone in to look at the social accountability component, which is key in terms of managing resources. We've done for some other sectors, especially petroleum, but for the gold mining, there's not much done in that space. So CDD thought that it would be a very good initiative over the years that we have done this work to have a look at our minerals, we call it the rich minerals district, to assess, to evaluate over the years, how have we done? What are we using our monies for? How are you spending the money? Are citizens even aware, especially in the mining communities? You realize that most of the mining communities, there are lots of agitations from the youth. They want employment, they want development. And so...
And rightly so. As I was making the point earlier, they live in the community, see the wealth that is coming out of their land, out of their soil, but it hasn't got a matching effect, a matching reflection on their own lives in the communities. Of course, they will demand it.
And I am from a mining community.
Which district is that?
I'm from Westside East District, from Achampim, and I'm from a mining town. And I saw as a young girl when the mining community came to my community and our lands were taken away. I remember going to the farm as a younger age. My father carried me. Then it got to a point we were no longer going to farm because my father had to release the land for...
So that's your livelihood gone?
That was a livelihood gone. So there was no more farming for us. We had to buy everything. And seeing my father struggle through life and having to support us, it was quite difficult. And you are wondering that if you have to give your land to the mining community, and so there should be some alternative livelihood. There should be some support for even the children growing up. Some of us were fortunate to pass through some stages to be where we are now. But if you go back home, you see a lot more young people still living in in a very deplorable state. And so for me, this is more personal to me because I think that coming from a mining community, we haven't done so much in terms of, we see it. We see a lot of people in there. There are a lot of cars. We see every week there's the gold that they come take. And then that was the first time some of us saw a helicopter. And then we knew that they were taking the gold away. So how was this affecting that? So for me, this is something...
And your findings are shocking that after all the decades of mining in these districts, the average performance, average score is 38.4, which means that it's poor, actually.
Very poor.
I mean, you say it's a weak score, and I know you're being charitable, but this is extremely, extremely poor.
Yeah.
I mean, for these communities. In effect, the mining that we've done in the communities haven't had a developmental impact on the lives of the people there.
Right.
You know, it's not even 50%.
No, no. It also shows that we haven't really paid attention to these mining districts. And also because most of the time, you realize that the district will say, oh, you have the mining company. There's a corporate social responsibility. They have a way of engaging the community. And so there's not much attention, especially from government, and supporting the community.
And you make a very important point. It is not the job and responsibility of the mining firms to develop the communities.
No.
It's not. It's government's job to do so.
Right.
And that is why the laws say that the mining firms will pay their taxes and they'll pay the royalties.
Yeah.
And it's government job to take that money and use it to develop the communities. And you think that if government takes them and they will prioritize the districts where the mining is happening first before everybody else.
Right.
But we see the reverse. It hits the consolidated fund, big black hole, disappears.
Yeah.
And once everything else is finished, we think about what goes to the community. And then you actually find that even when we allocate the money, only 54% of the money actually goes to the communities.
Yeah. And even with the 58%, you realize that it delays. It's not as regular as we expected. And so...
You mean for the amount that
for
actually
the amount
goes?
that actually goes. So you go in now and you realize that, oh, some monies have delayed. You don't get it as you want. We had the charts to show almost all the districts. You realize that by the time you expect the money, it doesn't come. You have to wait, and so you have to push forward whatever project. And it's also very small. We thought about it. 10%. The larger part goes to the government consolidated fund, and then the 10% you have to share between the school land, the assembly, and then out of that, you have to get some for the main community development. And interestingly, I did some work I did my national service with a mining company in my community. And as a community relations officer, it gets to a point the mining says, we are doing what we can. We pay royalties, we pay taxes, and we expect the government also to support the process. And so it's left, and sometimes communities within catchment communities, we call them, are left behind without any support because the assemblies think that let's concentrate on other communities that do not have this support from CSR. So it's
so you record
yeah.
135.6 million CDs arrears in terms of what the communities were entitled to by royalties that didn't go.
Right.
Over what period is this are we talking about?
So our baseline was in 2020. Okay. So before we started, we wanted to make sure where all the allocations, because this the Minerals Development Fund was set up in 2016. So by 2020, almost all the local mining committees have been set up. So our baseline was in 2020 to make sure have these monies been submitted. So by 2020, when we did our baseline, most of the funds had been submitted until we started. So 2021, we're tracking 2022 until 2023, we finished our reports. So it was more of getting data from administrative data from the Minerals Commission, the Minerals Development Fund Secretariat, they have a secretariat as well, and also from the district as well, to find out. And Ghana Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, also we got some data from, they do the subnational data as well. So that's where we're getting more of our data from. So our baseline was in 2020 actually.
I see, I want to bring in the Chief Executive Officer of the Obuasi Municipal Assembly, and he's on the line with us, Elijah Adanse Bona, Municipal Chief Executive Officer of the Obuasi Municipal Assembly. And Elijah, thanks for joining us. I see your performance on the ranking, and it's a very horrible one indeed, because you scored 35.4. You are right there at the average mark, which, in fact, you're below average, because the average is 38.4, which means your area, and Obuasi is famous globally for gold. And to read that in terms of the development outcomes there, you're scoring below average. That's shocking. You must be extremely worried by this, but you're not surprised, are you?
Thank you very much, Evans. According to my sister sitting there, and the records she has now, She is saying that we scored below average. Well, that was what she did, and that was what she found. So I'm not here to argue with her whether we scored that or not. But what I want to say is that mining, as we've already discussed, started long ago. But it is true that mining communities have not benefited that much from the mining activities in our areas. I'm also from a mining community, born and bred in Obuasi. It is true that we've not benefited that much. I would attribute that to monitoring. Before the presidential assent was given to the MDF Act 2016, assemblies were asked to submit their action plans to the ministries. So whenever you sent your action plan, then the disbursement will be made to the assembly. But they were not following up. They were not monitoring. So it was difficult tracking how the funds were used.
When you say they were not following, do you mean the district chief
executive?
No,
I mean the ministry in charge, not assemblies.
When you say ministry, you mean the local government ministry?
No, I'm talking about lands and natural resources. They are in charge of, yes. So they were not monitoring. So when I ascended the position of an MC in Obuasi in 2017, at that time we had MDF Act, but it had not been implemented fully. But through the MDF Act, now we can properly monitor how funds are used in the assemblies. So if my sister could tell us from which period did she conduct that research, that would give us a better footing as far as this discussion is concerned. So
yeah, I think she clarified like 2020.
Okay, 2020.
Yes.
Yeah, so that is why I have a problem with her 38%. I don't know what. Well,
in fact, your score is even lower than that. Your score is 35.4% in Obuasi of all places.
Yeah. Yeah, that is what I'm saying.
You have made billionaires across the world, and yet your people are wallowing in poverty, extreme poverty there, to the point of where there's the link between the gold you're producing, it's not reflecting people's lives. You don't disagree with that, do you?
Well, yes. For this one, I can't disagree. However, if we are to go back to our mining laws, sometimes we make such issues out of the fact that we don't have good development in our mining areas. However, we don't look at what our mining laws say. We don't have a lot of people advocating that we should change our mining laws.
Before we come to change our mining, let's start with what you have. Let's start with the royalties. Are you getting your royalties, and are you getting them on time? And are you getting what is allocated to you?
Well, on time we are not.
Okay.
And yes, we are not getting it on time. Now, this is clear. Whoever follows.
So you are not getting it on time, but are you getting what you are allocated?
No, we are not getting it. My sister said we get 10% of the royalties. No, it is rather 20%. Whenever mining companies pay their royalties to the government through MIF, Minerals Income Investment Fund, they also allocate 20% to MDF. Then MDF takes 10%, and then 10% also goes to administrator of stool lands. But they are all mineral royalties. Even the 20% is not enough. I have been advocating that we should increase it. If you come to Obuasi, I came to office in 2017-18. By 2019-20, that was when MDF's local management committees were formed. Now we have LMC, which is directly under MDF, and they don't report to the assembly. So I don't know whether my sister captured the disbursements from MDF to the local management committees in her report. So if you judge or if you assess Obuasi without considering the fact that we have local management committees that receive the monies from MDF, but not to the assemblies.
Okay.
If you come to Obuasi,
so
I have used I have used my funds to do significant projects. By Thursday, I will be commissioning a 2-story health center in Obuasi. I use mineral royalties to do that. As I speak with you now, I'm constructing a 2-story nurses bungalow for Sanso Health Center from the mineral royalties. So I don't know how she conducted her research and concluded that Obuasi scored 35. Well, that is CDD. But they should have also come to us, those of us who were in Obuasi. I heard they had come to Obuasi without visiting the assembly where we have the information.
Well, but in these things, and I'll ask her to respond to that, and I'll also be speaking to Nate Vandapa shortly. It's really about the people, right? I mean, I get it. Yeah, talk to the assembly is important. I'm pretty sure they definitely did. But mainly, when you talk to the people, you get a true picture. If they're feeling the development in their lives, they will tell you. And it will be very obvious to see. And I'll get to her pretty sure. But I'm curious in Obuasi's case. Are you owed some arrears when it comes to royalties?
Now, whoever conducts a research in all the mining districts, you definitely have arrears, not only Obuasi. I mean, this is a common.
Yeah, I know it's a job because I have you. I'm asking you specifically. In your case, are you owed arrears?
So that is what I'm saying, that it is evident that we've not received all. However, how much we've received, we are putting them to good use.
Okay, so that's what he believes they're doing there. A few of the questions he's asked you.
So we had 5 components we're looking at. We're looking at fiscal transparency. We are looking at citizens' engagement and participation. We're looking at the effectiveness of the local assembly itself. How are they able to utilize the funds? We're looking at the local management committee. And the local management committee, the DCE is supposed to be part of the local management committee, and then members of the communities in the catchment areas of the mining companies. So I'm surprised he says that they are not aware. He's also doing some projects from the Minerals Development Fund. What we're also looking at was, are citizens aware of how much is given to them? So you may be using the money to do some work. How are you able to even label it? Because sometimes we want to check. You said you use the money for this. What shows that this is what you use the money for? And sometimes we even have to indicate labeling. And those we spoke to were purposive about our sampling. We spoke to assembly members, unit committee, members that are supposed to know. So we were not speaking to anybody in the community. We wanted to be sure that these people should know, at least they should know about the Minerals Development Fund and what the assembly is using the funds for. And so if the assembly members were not aware how much, so we're looking at even how much is coming. Are they able to publicize the amount? It was only in Brave North that actually had it on their scoreboard. When you go to the assembly, you were able to indicate that this is how much is coming into it. So there were different components that we're looking at, about 22 sub-components out of these 5 things we're looking at. The utilization, if those died, what are you using the money for? Are you using it for us you are supposed to? And the communities, are they aware? Do you even engage them in terms of planning and budgeting? So it wasn't just about knowing that you are using the money, but do the communities even know that whatever he's saying is what the minerals development funds are being used for? So
the point you're making to him is that your score is not just about the fiscal development that he's talking about. It's about the governance practices. It's about the limited citizen participation. It's about poor citizen evaluation. And then poor development outcomes, which is really what he was focusing on. But there are other
parts of it. And they scored 0 in terms of local management committee effectiveness.
They scored 0.
Sorry, 1.1. 1 out of
1 out of what?
100.
Wow.
In terms of, so when we did that, so in terms of local management committee.
Yeah, just a second, I'll come to you.
I'm sorry, 1 out of 100. The one they scored.
Which metric is it?
So we looked at the local management. The local management committee effectiveness, the committee. So
what is the role of the local management committee?
So that's what I want to say. So the role of the local management committee is that, so the composition is clear. The district chief executive is part. Chiefs in those catchment communities are members. They have to have a women's leader. We need to have a youth leader. You need to also have someone appointed by the board to be part of it. And so they are supposed to work on planning, budgeting, to decide what they will use this money for.
The royalties?
The royalty, the percentage that goes
to them.
Yes, the local management committees. So they had decided, and we have to also engage the public. You have to engage the communities, mining communities, and say, this is how much we have. That's the law mandates them. You have to tell them, this is how much we have in our budget. What should we use it for? Or we've planned to do this and that. There's no more. We realized that there were no engagement. People, communities did not even know. And when we say people did not know, members who are supposed to know, unit committee, assembly members, didn't have information about the total amount that they had received and what they were using the money for. So some of them were able to show us, we are using this money for this, but how do you know that indeed this money is being used for this activity? So another indicator we added on was that, are you able to label? You know, usually when government starts a project, they say this is funded by this project. That's also another way of letting the communities know that this money is through Minerals Development Fund. Because most of the time, communities think they are not doing anything, but some of the communities, they're actually doing something with the fund, but they are not able to engage the citizens. So the citizens do not know. And for assembly member to not know about the funding, that's in itself is an issue.
They score 1 out of 100. Yes.
So that was what dropped them in terms of
he has a response.
Citizen participation. They scored above average 52.3.
Yes.
And others.
Yes, Elijah.
Yeah. So I want to say that CDD's work in Obuasi, I can say, they didn't do the right job. I can say that because if you are doing purposive sampling, it means that you knew the people you were coming to talk to. Right? We conducted assembly elections not long ago, and most of the assembly members lost the elections. So there are new ones. Unit committee members, some were also voted out. So if you go to where we are commissioning the health center on Thursday, the people there were engaged. If you go to where the nurses' bungalow being constructed, the people were engaged, and they are aware that such a project. So if you meet an assemblyman, maybe a new assemblyman who doesn't have information, why didn't you select those who were there when we started the project? So you go there and you meet somebody who doesn't have information. So positive sampling, you have to sample those you know can speak to the issues. And if you come to the assembly, we have minutes of meetings, engagements. I have done community engagements, community debates, explaining projects. If you come to the assembly, we'll give you minutes. Then you cross-check with the chiefs and the people of the communities. So if they couldn't find any of these, then perhaps, well, they have done their job. But as far as I am concerned, I think that they didn't go down well. They did not select the right people, because after the engagement, I got information that as gentleman in Obuasi, who is an NGO, who represents one of the NGOs, did a poor job, a poor work. So some of my local management committee members came and told me that when they read their findings, the reports they presented to them, they challenged them. So I am taking this opportunity to challenge CDD, those who came to do the work in Obuasi, that they didn't do it well. They should come and do it again. They should come to areas where the people are benefiting. They should select people who were there when we commenced the project. So any committee member who has just come was not even involving himself in activities.
Well,
Go to those who were there when we started the project.
I mean, I'll come to the specifics, but I mean, let's establish the essentials. We've already established, and you don't disagree, that in terms of the link between the mining and its impact on the people's lives, there's a huge gap there, and the development is not matching.
From 2020.
Yes.
See,
it did. I mean, and that's that. I think we all understand that this is a long-standing problem, which really is a fundamental issue that we are trying to get at. As in, we must see that correlation, strong correlation between the mining and the wealth that is being generated and the quality of people's lives in the communities. And so that fundamentally is the issue we're trying to unpack here. Stay with me. I want to bring in the ranking member on the local government committee in Parliament, Nilanti Vanapoy, who is joining me right now on the line, because this obviously has to do with the effectiveness of the local government structure. I know the minority, they've been already been fighting government when it comes to the disbursement of the funds to the District Assembly Common Fund. And now we're also learning that the royalties that the communities are entitled to from mining isn't going. And as I've already illustrated for you, only 54%, in fact, 54% of what is allocated doesn't go, right? And government owes right now 135 million CDs in arrears from 2020. Surprised at these numbers as I'm throwing out these numbers. CDD has found out that in terms of the royalties that must go to these mining districts, it isn't going to the mining districts. And we're seeing more poverty in these areas because of that disconnect between the wealth that is being generated on their soil and the quality of people's lives.
Well, thank you very much, Evans. Let me say good evening to your listeners and your viewers. Evans, the truth of the matter is that, as I've analyzed in the past, we are not giving the required attention to local governance. If we are, almost 95% of our problems will be solved. Even as we've just thrown out there, as we've just analyzed from the CDD, it is true that remittances to district assembly from stool lands, from royalties, district assemblies, common fund, and the rest, are done at the whims and caprices of government and the executive and the central government. What is even required by law, statutorily, they don't even do it. They don't even respect the law. But for the fact that some of our colleagues even went to the Supreme Court to seek a declaration on what constitutes total national revenue and whether government has the right to cap the district assemblies, common fund, and the rest, government will have done what he wanted to do without consulting with assembly, without considering the fact that development per se emanates and starts from the grassroots. I am particularly worried about the fact that the MCE is struggling to be able to justify why we're having a situation. But the situation is unjustifiable. Government has no right, any authority under our law, to deny the district assemblies of all revenues, emphasis on all revenues that are needed for the development of our districts. No matter, I don't care whoever is in government, the truth of the matter is that no government has the right to deny the district assemblies what is due them for the development of their districts.
Yeah, but it's happening nonetheless. And I need to come back to, so how do we compel the government to do what the law already mandates them to do?
I think we've already decided that we're going to look at our laws once again. Recently, we went to Kenya, and even the Kenyan government will not dare touch what the law says about remittances to the districts and the counties. They won't dare. They won't try it. In fact, what they've always done is even going beyond the target, going beyond the minimum figure. And every district knows what they are getting from the common fund, or be it the remittances, royalties, and the rest. So the assembly's budget, prepare their composite budget, their development programs, in line with the budgetary allocation that they know they are supposed to get from the percentage of total revenue. So if you deny the assembly the amount they're supposed to get, even if it is 1% of what they are supposed to get, what it means is that the development programs of the assembly will suffer revenue or resources by 1%. And even to some extent, I would say, because they have elected the county mayors and sheriffs,
Hello, Mr. Vanderpoel? I may have lost him there. He was onto something there. I believe he was possibly going to say that because they elect their county mayors, etc., they are more accountable to the people. And that's a big conversation I know CDD has been backing, to have our MMDCs elected so that they are directly responsible and accountable to the people, which is something you measured to find that accountability process isn't there because the citizens are not as involved in the process of deciding what to use the money for. That is fundamental to the problem, isn't it?
It's actually reflected in our report, especially with the composition of the local mining committees. You realize that some of them by appointment, and so...
Who appoints?
So that's also the another issue. We realize that most of them have been politicized. So the DC is supposed to be there, the chief. Some of them are quite defined. So if you are district chief executive, you are on the committee. If you are a chief, a traditional leader in the mining area, you're also a member of it. But you also need youth leader, women leader. When I was trying to find out who are the members in my area. And they mentioned some names, and I'm wondering if it's... You realize that how do you select them? So it's influenced by the board. They have a board, and then you are supposed to also appoint another person. So because it's not very well defined, you realize that some of the members we spoke to during our field work said, oh, it's by appointment, and others can take a decision that this person has to be on the board, to be on the committee or not. And members of the communities do not even know them or do not know that they are representing them. And so we are also calling for a bit more of reform. Let's have a look at it again. If we are able to define it properly and give the opportunity to women group or the youth group to have a decision, okay, we want this person to represent, that in itself helps with the transparency process of the committee composition.
Beyond the royalties, though, even if all the 10% is coming in, it will make much of a difference, would it?
It would.
It would?
Yeah.
Much of a difference. All the money that the 10% can provide. So how much of a difference would it make to the people?
So,
and isn't there, I'm asking this question, isn't there the argument to increase the 10% in law?
Yes, we're actually calling for an increase. Because
to what? From 10% to what?
So I think many have argued about 20, 30%, because when you give 20%, 10% is going into MDF, the two lands take their percentage, and so the distribution is quite all over. And we thought that if they could increase it to 20, 30%, I think GITI had advocated for 20 or 30. When we had the conversation, even the chiefs were calling for 20% for stool lands as well. And so I think it's for us all, stakeholders, government, Minerals Commission, the assemblies, for us to have a conversation, because really the 10% is not enough. But for us, even the 10%, we can actually utilize it well as it's supposed to be utilized, because it's also not very defined. It actually says economic infrastructure and livelihood. And so the assemblies have their own discretion as to what to use the money for. And when you go into the book, some of them have used it for what it's not supposed to be used for, actually.
So they are misapplying the amount?
Yes, they are actually, some of them are really misapplying some of the funds. So that's also some of the fundings that we find that. So we are calling for increase, but even with a 10, can we have a bit of transparency around it? Can we utilize the money very well?
So I hear you saying a few things. One, for the 10, when you allocate, distribute all.
Distribute all.
Let it go on time.
On time.
And use it effectively and efficiently, but involve the communities.
Involve the community. Let them know, because the mining companies actually suffer a lot. Recently, we see a lot of demonstration and fighting among the young people there. So when the people, community members know, there's also another extra income. Apart from this Minerals Development Fund, the district also gets their common fund, and the DDF and all others. So we thought that this is supposed to complement it and to add on. So, but out of this all abundance of resources, you still realize that these communities live in a very poor condition. The inequality keep widening in these various areas. And so we need to have a look at it again, engage the citizens to ensure, where do we get this project? I realize that because of the committee members, they lobby for what is supposed to be done. And so for us, the reform is to have a conversation. Can we go by the district development plan, what is supposed to be there, so that they do not reinvent any other activities based
beyond the plan?
Beyond, yeah, right.
Let me bring in Elijah. Would you want an increase in the royalties from the current 10 to whatever number?
Because, I mean, she's confusing me. She is talking about 10%. 10% of what? I know it is 20%.
Yes.
And we have been advocating that they should increase it to 30-40%. Because per the MDF Act, MIF, Minerals Income and Investment Fund, is supposed to distribute 20% of the royalties. And then the 20% will be distributed to the communities, because Administrator of Stool Lands receives 10% of the 20%. And Administrator of Stool Lands also disburses the same money to the communities.
Yeah.
So it is not 10% as she's saying. It is 20%, but it is still not enough. 20%, some goes to Geological Survey, to Administrator of Stool Lands, MDF, to directly to the mining communities. So maybe she should clarify that. And we have guidelines that we follow. I believe she needs time to read the MDF Act and then our guidelines too. Because if she says that people were selected into the committee, but as if we did not select them based on anything, we just handpicked them. That is not the issue. Guidelines are there to guide us as to who serves on the committee and how we should do our work. So if she couldn't get the opportunity to read the guidelines and the MDF Act well, I think she can do it next time. For me, we need an increase because we need to do more.
And you say you have guidelines. You say you have guidelines. Are you complying with the guidelines?
Yes, we are complying. As humans, we may not, implement it or follow it 100%.
But why not? You have a guideline. How come you are not following it 100%? You must follow it 100%.
Well, if it is 90, if you go to school and you score 80, 100, definitely, as humans as we are, you may not be able to, due to whatever reasons. So I am saying that, yes, we are doing our best. The MDF Act came into force in 2016. We couldn't implement it until 2019, 2020. COVID came, so there was a gap. After COVID, 2021, 22, 23, Obuasi Municipal Assembly, we are using the funds disbursed well.
Let me ask you this before I bring Lante Banapa back in. Considering that you are a mining district and considering the contribution you make to the economy generally, would you argue that for mining district like yours, you must get a sizable chunk of the national cake as far as the mining contribution to the national kitty is concerned before everybody else is looked at, because you obviously are a mining district?
Yes, that has been my concern all the time. I remember when I was doing my master's at Legon, I did community relations in mining. And when I was working on my literature review, I found something that if you go to the Latin America, Europe, and other countries where they do mining, there are laws that even do not allow mining companies to do their CSR on their own. But in Ghana, we don't have such laws. So for me, I believe that mining communities need more than we are receiving now.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about the mining companies. After the mining company, they are private profit-making enterprises. I'm talking about government. I'm talking about the government, because the government receives, they take the taxes, they take the royalties, and everything else that the companies are able to pay by law. When government takes it, should the government allocate? Should the government be allocating first of all? How much should go to the community before they think about what else to use the money for?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello?
I can hear you, Elijah. Okay, let me bring in. Let me bring in the ranking member on the local government committee who has joined me again. Nilante Banapa, I was asking you before we lost you, that how do you compel government to send these monies to the community? I know you went to the Supreme Court. I know the minority, you went to court to compel government to actually disburse what it's supposed to disburse. Should that approach be adopted for the royalties that must go to the assemblies? Okay, I may have lost Nilante Banapa there too. Do I have Elijah on?
I'm here, Evans.
Okay, I was asking you about quickly, should priority be given first to mining communities, mining districts, in the allocation of the national funds, national cake? Yes,
because if you look at Obuasi, Takwa, Pristia, and all these mining communities, in fact, we need to be taken care of better than any other district in this country.
And what should this look like? In real terms, what should this look like beyond the royalties?
Beyond the royalties?
Yeah.
Please, I didn't get that.
No, I'm saying you said you agree that priority must be given to the mining districts. Beyond the royalties, what more do you expect the state to be doing in prioritizing development in your area in terms of how much taxes are allocated to you, how much infrastructure investment? What does it look like for you? What do you want to see?
Well, I think a lot depends on the districts too, because when I ascended this position, Obuasi was not getting enough in terms of revenue generation. And there was a problem I identified. We needed to do data collection to know the people who have the potential to pay rates to the assembly. If you don't have data, you can't work on it. So if assemblies we invest in data collection, I believe we'll be able to identify more people who would pay taxes to the local assembly, because we cannot always rely on gold mining. Without gold mining, assemblies must run. For instance, I did a reevaluation of assets, property. If you go to most of the assemblies, there are properties, they say they are unassessed. And unassessed, you have to give it a flat rate. So they don't pay the realistic rate. So if you value somebody's property and the person is going to pay, let's say, 1,000 Ghana cedis a year, if it is unassessed, you are going to, let's say, put a flat rate of, let's say, 200 Ghana cedis or 300 Ghana cedis. So I would advise that all assemblies should invest in one, data collection, and two, we should do reevaluation of properties periodically so that we will not continue to collect meager. Otherwise, if the gold mining is no more, they are going to, or we are going to suffer.
Okay,
so we need to do as assemblies.
Yeah, okay, so that is the assemblies themselves finding alternatives to the gold, because the gold is a finite commodity, by the way. The extraction won't go on forever, as you've seen in some of the areas that mine has ended because it's not commercially viable. I mean, Lantevanapa joins me again very briefly. I lost him earlier. Just a minute to wrap up. Mr. Lantevanapa, I was asking earlier, you attempted, in fact, you went to the courts to compel government to release all what they're supposed to, under the common fund. Should that approach be adopted for the royalties? Oh goodness, I lost him there again. Let's wrap up with you. Okay. So I see your recommendations. Yes. And a lot of the recommendations you have, we've seen it before. There's nothing radical in there. Governments will just throw this away. I mean, regular disbursements of royalties, they won't do it. Strengthening transparency and oversight, we just had it there. It's not going to happen. Development Mineral Revenue Management Act, yes, maybe you get that, but we know as in Ghana, new laws don't solve the problems, right? Foster greater citizen engagement, it's fantastic, but it's nice language. You must have something of that will compel government to act, which is why I was asking earlier. Shouldn't the courts be part of the options available? Because the law says, let it go.
We actually believe in active citizen participation. And we are happy that we have started generating a conversation around this. We started with just 8, and we are hoping that we reach out to all the 21. Because when citizens are aware of these allocations, and then they'll start asking the right questions with the assembly, because some of the assemblies also told us they have challenges.
I get the point, but we are dealing with two problems here.
Right.
If the money goes, then of course the citizen participation becomes important. Yes. But if the money isn't going, 54% of what is given doesn't go.
We can get citizens to equally call for that.
For the government?
Yes.
For the government to disburse?
For government to disburse.
Oh, but we've been calling the common fund as a clear example. There have been demonstrations. It didn't happen until somebody went to the court to compel it.
Right, that's also another way someone could look at. But for us, we think that there's power actually in the voice of the people, when the people actually are interested in what is happening. And this money is assured money. And if you're able to calculate every ounce of gold, this is how much it comes in. We didn't concentrate on the other 10% because it goes to the office of the stool land. That's why I keep saying 10, because...
Yeah, I understand. Because you're looking at what comes to...
Yes, so that's what we're looking at. But we think that if citizens are able to have this evidence base, and for the first time, some people said, we didn't even know there was something like this. And so we think if citizens themselves, we don't have to move from Center for Democratic Development to go down to Obuasi, to go down to Takwa in Sayem, to go down to Bremnor. If Bremnor people will appreciate that this is what they actually get from the district, from royalties, as the mines in their communities, then they can also start asking.
But somebody must do that. Somebody, I know citizens must demand, but you have to empower the citizens to do.
We'll be happy to support any process. I'm sure the CDD, we are already in court with a number of items. And if it's
Vera, thank you very much. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.